זה, אז יש
אפשר כל שבוע, שבועיים לראות כמה אנשים באמת יש. למרות שביקשתי להם להשתבץ עד מחרתיים. כי אני אעזור להזכיר להם את זה. אם תשאיר לי כמה דקות אני אזכיר להם את זה.
בהתחלה, הנה רגע שיש לנו... לא, אני רוצה שנראו אותי. ואז אני רוצה גם קול, ואז אני רוצה קול עובד.
איך הייתה הפגישה עם הילד?
נשמע, אני מתקפת בערב, אחרי הצהריים. כן, היום גם ניפגש. שתפתו טוב.
אז מחר בתשע ברחובות?
אם הייתי צריכה לשיר את זה, הייתי גם.
טוב, אני מעלה את זה לאתר?
תגידי, 11 ברבע, אני כבר לא זוכרת.
אני מעלה את זה לאתר? תודה.
מה שיש לי כרגע זה לא לגמרי זה, בואי...
את לא עובדת בדרופבוקס?
לא, אני שמרתי את זה אצלי כדי שישמעו את הצלילים. בדרופבוקס זה לא שם את הצלילים.
תעשי סבב לשם. זה לא ישמעו את הצלילים בבית.
נעשה סייב בדרופבוקס, תקללי את זה. אז אני צריך לעשות עוד פעם לשב לפה כדי שאני אוכל לעשות את זה למצוא. יקבלי שם טוב?
בסוף השיעור.
זה שינוי מאוד קטנים. My name is Mara Prasad, and I'm a professor in psychology and brain research, which means that my lab is located in psychology, but I'm also part of Delphic. In my personal background, it's not in psychology. I guess it says something about the integrative aspect of the field. My background is biology, computer science, but I'm doing high-level cognition kind of questions, and I think it will have an impact, at least that's what I hope, on the perspective that I will try to present in the course. And this is kind of try to integrate things you hopefully have learned, even more hopefully still remember to an extent from other courses. And the main goal that I have in mind is, well, yeah, to teach you, we teach together, we learn together, some recent observations, but most importantly is the attempt to try to learn to think cognition. This learn to think using the information that you have is quite challenging, always. In a way, is this the class you're looking? So we start at 1. Part of what I'm trying to go through today is that there's a huge difference between knowing to the extent that you can repeat and being able to explicitly manipulate, which I would call thinking, with information. And the goal of this course is to get some information, but mainly to try to integrate things, to try to get to thinking about them. And this is to a large extent the goal of the homework that you have, which gets to some technical issues. And Eva, who sits at the back, is the TA of the course, and if I forget something, what you had in mind, then just let me know. So in terms of formal course requirements, the course in terms of number of lessons turns out to be quite short because there are fewer Sundays than any other date of the week in this semester. Originally there were 11, and then there were 2 Sundays that the university didn't teach and said, well, we'll do the same just with fewer days. We'll try to do that, we'll see how it goes. But you actually have only 9 lessons. So basically you're expected to attend lessons. You're expected to attend 11 lessons. I guess you might not do that. But if you don't attend a lesson, that's okay. But basically, you're expected to attend, and if it's more than 1 lesson, then you have to come to it or not. And that's a problem. In terms of homework, there's 4 homework assignments. You already got the first one. I think in 3 of them, the idea is to try to replicate experiments, so kind of implement an experiment on the internet, and I think it's interesting sort of to experience it yourself. It's not trivial to replicate even the most classic experiments, and the question is, or even if you replicate, there's always variability, and where does the variability come from? So I think it's very, I think it's an interesting, it's an important experience to try to replicate studies, the studies which show several, which we thought that was important, and second are things related to things that we like to discuss, and the idea is that you first do it yourself, then you compare to other people's data, and then you compare to the original paper that had its own data, often about the same amount of data that we'll have, and see how it compares to previous studies, and try to reason about why it works so well, or alternatively why it doesn't. There's also 1 presentation in class, so each person is supposed to present once in class. The way we made it is that for each paper, 2 most of you have already chosen. If you have any questions about it, so every person should talk about it and then kind of stuff. The first two lessons today and next week I'm going to go to the oral presentation with hopefully some discussion. Third week I think is the first time that we have the presentation. The idea is that each paper is chosen by two. How you divide, I think it's useful to discuss work, which in a minute I'll say something about homework as well. But how you divide it in class between you, it's the presentation is your call, but I mean, so there's supposed to be some division. So both of you are going to prepare, and to some extent, both of you are going to present roughly to the same extent, but how exactly will be your choice. And there's a last thing. Okay, and at the end, you're supposed to present and to submit a short paper, which will discuss topics that might or may not be informative for you now, but we're going to learn and discuss it, which is predictive coding. This is something we're going to talk about towards the end of the course, and we'd like to hear your perspective about it, but not now, okay? After we've discussed it, you've read about it, etc. There's also something small that you're supposed to play.
Next week.
Which is?
They're supposed to submit something next week. It's in 2 weeks.
Okay, this is kind of the homework requirements overall, right? Did I miss something? It's all here, let's see. So it's like, these are the 3 experiments that you're supposed to, this is the presentation in class, and a paper you're supposed to submit on predictive coding, but that's really towards the end of the semester. In terms of actual topics, we had no class in the beginning, and today I'm actually trying to, this is the 13th, I think. So today I'm trying to present from my perspective of cognition, the idea of why I chose the actual specifics of this lesson. I think what I'd like to present provides some kind of broad conceptual framework within which we can understand lots of the things that we're talking about, we'll be talking about from others, which is kind of what is cognition, types of cognition, you'll understand in 3 minutes. And next week we're going to discuss working memory. It's going to be my presentation. The week after, long-term memory, so kind of 2 extremes. Extremely small working memory that we have. How can we be successful overall as a species, as human beings, given our extremely small, how small working memory is all done. Basic cognition class, how small is our working memory? How large is our working memory? Yeah, I always ask it, I always get it, and it's kind of a trick question. Short version, we wish, okay? If you're asked to repeat some very, very familiar items, you can get, you asked to get to something like 7 items at best, typically smaller. If we need to do something with them, which is kind of, it's not just repeating, it's also manipulating. And this distinction about thinking in a way, manipulating in an explicit way versus just repeating is a very crucial distinction. If you have to do something with it, how many can we remember? Let's say less. The extremes would say 1, but we'll talk about it next week. So how come we manage so well? Well, we have huge long-term memory. How huge? Well, experiment 1, which most of you have done, or at least half of you have done so far, kind of the idea is to have some evaluation of how large it is, right? So, and also how detailed it is, how explicit it is, how can we retrieve it, all these sort of, some notion about all these aspects. Let's say for now it's huge, and this is how we do so well. But the question is, how can we use it in the proper time? Okay, there's lots of things that are stored somewhere, and we have to be able to retrieve them and use them functionally in the right time. So this is kind of a very broad introduction into this sort of interplay is what we'll do today. And then, the week after, we have ISFN, which is the meeting, the Israeli neuroscience meeting, and since it's an ELSEC course, and ELSEC promotes going to the Israeli neuroscience meeting in Eilat, you will not have a lesson on this week. You will all be in Eilat. But we won't have a lesson. And then we have a series of short series of lessons on statistical learning, sort of like our ability to learn the statistics of the environment, which is kind of, maybe this is how we do so well in spite of so short, so limited working memory, but we'll address it from several perspectives. Is it how we acquire language? So it kind of, can we think about language as a skill that is largely acquired by our exposure to the statistics of sounds, speech sounds in the environment? And we'll do several experiments in, I think it's the second homework. Is it the second homework study that we're supposed to do? Then we'll have guest lecturer who's Yuval from psychology, and she studies language acquisition in children. And there's a big debate which I think she will introduce, and we'll discuss it. I think it's all about statistical learning. To what extent? What is the minimal assumption for some predispositions that we need to be born with in order to acquire language? So not tabula rasa. The question is like, these are two extremes. To what extent we are born with, I don't know, innate ability to acquire syntax versus something which is very, very broad and general. These are things we'll discuss, and we'll discuss implicit learning in other contexts. And in a way, to a large extent, these all, I think, fall into the same topic, sort of inferences, which kind of how you implicitly learn about the environment, and to what extent it can also explain sophisticated things that we have, sort of like reasoning. Can reasoning that we have, or sort of reasoning, be accounted for by these implicit learning, statistical learning processes? And predictive coding, just one sentence, and this is one we're not sure yet about the last lesson. We had some ideas, but because we had to shrink to 2 weeks, we are not yet, we'll decide on it in a week or two. It's not really crucial. We're also never completely sure about the total number of students, so it has to do with how many presentations we have, how many student assignments we have, so we kind of will delay the final decision here with 2-3 weeks. That's about the general plan. Any general questions, specific questions? What is cognition? Since you all learned cognition A, you can all answer. In a way, I think it's very personal how broad you take it. My basic attitude is everything is cognition. You can start with like, why we believe in God or whatever. It kind of it encompasses kind of everything. There's a big question, to what extent science reflects the world versus our cognition. We won't address that, but it's kind of it's an open question, I think. What I try to present today is kind of to give a notion about what we mean in cognition is, well, it has two motivations. One, I think it's a very good framework, and the other, to some extent, is kind of a tribute to probably Israeli most renowned cognitive scientist, who is Daniel Kahneman. So the concept, but we'll take it from there, is taken from his recent, I'm not sure he's ever written an early one, but I think it's his 2011 book called Thinking Fast and Slow. Thinking Fast and Slow is his suggestion, but he's not the original person to suggest it, but it's a collection of many, many studies where he tries to promote the concept that cognition can be, in principle, divided to 2 modes of cognition. So if in general, cognition is how we reason, we perceive the environment, how we acquire information. He said, well, in principle, the 2 extreme modes, I don't know if you would, push the just 2. 2 is nice, 2 is easy, probably there's a continuum. So it's kind of to make a clear point instead of making it binary. It's probably not just 2, but let's clarify by having it 2 categories. One is like very fast, automatic, emotional, stereotypical in clarify in a minute, and subconscious is that we don't reason about it. This is the automatic, very, very quick performing system, but it has lots of flaws. Obviously, it's easy because we don't have to take it to make a lot of effort. It's quick, it's not serial, there's something automatic. Given that we are limited in the number of things that we can do intentionally at a time, it's very good that we have things that are to a large extent autonomous. This is system one. System two, on the other hand, is in a way what we intuitively think about cognition. When we think about cognition, we think we have to do all sorts of intentional operations. We think, we reason, we calculate. Let's think about presumably what you're trying to do now. It's kind of you pushing system two. To an extent, particularly if what I'm talking about is novel to you, you have to figure out how to arrange it in your mind, how to integrate it, so it's now, it's effortful. We don't like to activate system two because it's effortful, and we would like to activate system one. So it's good for logic, like logic is something which is really not in a minute, not intuitive, but we have, as a collective community, invented logic, we can use it, but it's not intuitive. I mean, part of the work that they have been doing at Kahneman and Tversky is showing how we fail on all sorts of logical reasoning stuff because the idea is that, well, we actually use system one, it has its characteristic fallacies, it has its characteristic illusions, and it is not very, very logical. We can calculate, it's conscious, and I will try to elaborate on it, and the main point I'd like to say is that the reason we manage to be successful in the world is that we manage, when we have successful experience, to funnel things from system two to system one. So this is what the novice has to implement, because we have no we have no experience, so there's nothing we can use for this specific issue, for this specific context, and the expert uses system one. So the question is, successful learning is how we successfully funnel things from system two based to system one based kind of work, and this transfer, this successful learning between the novice and the expert is what I'd like to elaborate on today.
Just wanted to say that for me, emotional is system two as well, partially. I'm not sure why emotional is slow. Sometimes you actually process.
You did say emotional is the fast one, right?
Not always.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's by this division it says that emotion is like very intuitive and fast, and sometimes you do process.
I don't mind. That's okay with me, but I think the idea is, suppose you hear a joke. You can find it funny and laugh, and then but you could say, I don't understand why it's funny, and somebody will explain it to you, and you will understand, but you will still not laugh. So the laughing part would be, the intuitive laughing part would be system one, and the understanding why it's supposed to be funny, but maybe it doesn't make you laugh, would be system two. So this is kind of the distinction. So it's kind of the intuitive feeling, performance that it gives you. You can understand, but not necessarily have the same emotion, which is kind of the reason I gave this idea. Let's say this is kind of how we think about Asperger, autism, for instance, like high functioning in terms of here, but some aspects are not implicitly associate the same association.
For me, I think that system two is like the whole brain computation, and system one is the individual part. So there are not two systems, but system one is the thing that when you put it together, a lot of system one part you get system two or something like that. So this is why it's slower, because it needs to integrate a lot of information.
So in a way you are suggesting that system two is an emergent property of lots of autonomous processes that collectively seem to be very smart, but in smart in a way because it's kind of sophisticated, but the sophistication is in the integration of lots of autonomous thought, something like this.
Yeah, it's a machine that gives lots of
Right. I will try to refute this hypothesis. Okay. Keep it in mind, and at the end, tell me if you are convinced. You're very welcome to say why I'm wrong, but let me. So, the idea is that system one, we always want to replace system two with system one because it's easier, because it's less effortful, etc., and maybe it demands also less metabolic resources. Let me just again give you more flavor. Questions? Okay. Flavor. So when we say, like, system one is what you have in mind for cognition. System two is, just a little, right? I would like to call this, it's the same concept, but I would like to number them differently. But anyhow, the complex effort for one, called two, is cognition, and the intuitive, automatic one is what we think about perception. I have something I perceive intuitively. I would like to convince you that as difficult, and if every task is initially difficult and serial, and think about it as cognitive, whereas the expert perceives the task. I will try to give you the example of very, very complex tasks, which are complex. Chess playing, reading, etc., where the novice is reasoning very, very slowly, and the more you become an expert, kind of perceive the chessboard. And then if you want to make something, which is, of course you have to feel it, because you can't really store all the permutations that are potentially relevant in chess, but the larger the units you have of perception, because you have part of it as stored, because you studied these specific games and arrangements, you become an expert, you become more perceived. I'll give you an example. A very well-known example in the literature is cognitive match. What's the idea of cognitive match? Versus groups, right? We want to know, explore the environment, we want to be familiar with how things are related to each other. But when I go from, so the question is, but how do I store this information if I want to go from one place to the other? One is routes, I know, okay, I go right, and then I do that, and then I do left, etc., a series of moves. But the idea is that with sophistication, or that's the question, is it an emergent property? It's not obvious. We can also plan a way between 2 points, even though you have never directly had to move between 1 and 2. You've explored this area, you've explored this area, so we have some general understanding or representation of the geographical relation between these points, and based on this understanding, we can, whatever, 3 ways, 3 whatever, I'm not sure to what extent. Another very interesting question is how these technologies and the actual, because we're talking about learning, so our learning experiences are now very different, but presumably you actually designed and you actually thought about the routes that you were taking, how are they related to having a cognitive map that we can plan to in advance. Similarly, reading. I'm not talking just about comprehension, but the actual decoding of the alphabetical script. So the idea of the alphabet is that you have a very small number, several dozen primitives, which are the basic letters, and the letters are mapped into sounds, say into phonemes, right? And in order to decipher what a string of letters stands in terms of semantics, in terms of meanings, the concept of the alphabet is you have to map it, so you map each, right, letter to sound, letter to sound, letter to sound, and then gradually, and this is a serial process, which has an algorithm. If it's a very simple, called transparent orthography, where the information that you have in the letter is sufficient to specify the sound, you do a serial decoding, and in the end of the serial decoding, you map to semantics. This is the novice who has to do this. So this is a system 2. It has to do the serial algorithm of mapping. However, let's say I would like to say that the expert actually doesn't do it. Maybe, let's say, the extreme doesn't do it serially because you have something, some kind of scheme. How detailed is it and what does it include is a question in itself. But it suffices for not needing to do a serial reading process. How can we measure it, by the way? Now, so far I've talked about concepts. Any idea about how to test this question? This is serial. The novice implements the alphabetical algorithm mapping between letters and sounds and ultimately to meaning. And let's say the expert doesn't. How can we test that? You already started, we know there's benefits to not waiting.
Keep shouting, yeah.
It works.
So maybe experiments with eye movements and speed of iteration between words. So
Yes,
serial is
yes.
very slow per each letter and so on. And the word will be like a completion on the middle of the word and then skipping on to the next one.
So we want to have some measure about how long it takes you to reach, let's say, I will elaborate on what I think you said, short words versus long words, and we can either use eye movement, so when do we skip to the next letter, or how long it takes us, because response time, how long it takes us before we actually verbalize a word. And the idea is that here it will take us, well, of course you're also slow, but the other thing is that the expert, let's say, will jump from one word to the other. Basically, even experts focus on almost every word, which is kind of a limiting bottleneck on the rate that we can read. The expert reads almost every word, focuses on almost every word. The idea is that the time it takes the expert to jump between one word and the other is, let's say, extreme, but you're making a case here, does not depend on the length of on the number of letters, let's say, in a word. So, whereas the novice is kind of also fixates more than one time on a word, but the idea is that the fixation duration and the fixation jump does not depend as long, but what would it depend on? It doesn't depend, in the extreme case, it doesn't depend on the number of letters, but it would depend on the it goes along with it, make the conceptual point.
Like the novice would read the same like the same speed and common word and a new word, and the expert will probably stick more with words that are really unfamiliar or
right.
Or
so the
have more
limiting,
mistakes.
so the expert's bottleneck would be more frequency in the language, the amount of previous exposure compared with the length of the actual word. So it's more about history versus the complexity, the complexity for the novice of the word that you're presented with now. Okay, that's the kind of solution. And another example, going between these two extremes, from serial to parallel, the sort of the novice versus the expert. And yet, does the word model-based ring a bell to anybody? So these are basically two modes of performance, two conceptual, theoretically derived two modes of performance. Model-based is when you know what you aim to do, you know what is needed, and you calculate your steps accordingly. You have a model. You know what you... Is this a question?
No,
You have a model and you calculate, okay, how do I attain my goals, the model, and you kind of calculate, and of course it has to do with the number of steps, with how many options, if you have a tree of planning, so of course it's the depth of the tree and how many options you want to take into account at every level of this hierarchy of the tree. Whereas model free, like you don't have a model in a way you're intuitive. This is system one. Suppose like, even here, this kind of applies to all these. For example, you want to plan a route from point A to point B, and then it's very serious. It's the first time, you have to do that, you have to do that. Maybe you want to consider the number of bifurcations that you have to take between A and B, and then you have to do this planning. However, given that you've done this 1,000 times, you don't have to do that. You can model free. You have something which is autonomous, and it's kind of habit-based. And we all know that even if at some point in time we want to go to somewhere which is not our usual route, if we don't monitor it, which kind of we might find ourselves doing actually the route we've done 1,000 times, because this is the one that doesn't require system 2 monitoring. This is kind of the autonomous thing that does the same thing, but we don't have to. This is what happens when you don't have to these controls and we don't have these online decisions, and it's very fast, but not necessarily the thing we want most to do in any given situation. Okay? This is an interesting thing, which is kind of system 1 versus system 2. Again, the same. I'm thinking about, I using it mostly as a sort of framework of thinking about modes of cognition, is that one is serial, etc., but it's not just a computational difference. I would try to show that it's implemented by different brain areas, and that in a way, and one of the reasons I wanted to say I don't share this point is because what is called system 2, or the areas in the brain that are activated, almost regardless of what is the new task that we are trying to do, but given that it's a new one, a challenging one, are very consistent. They would be called the working memory system, the one that implements the task, and they're very similar across situations. We know very little about what it is that they do. We know roughly where they are. When there are people doing scanning tasks, we can sort of scanning the people novice. I will show you some examples. It's roughly the same, any idea where? This is frontal areas, frontal areas like this very, let's say 40 frontal percent of the cortex. They do amazing things. We have no idea how. We'll say something about them, but really this is kind of cognition. Can say, aha, this likes and so. But we really don't know how the sort of the initial part, in a way, system 2 is implemented in the brain. We know roughly that it's consistently almost the same area, roughly the same areas, regardless of the task. So the question is, what is it that they consistently do as part of the onset, which is repeated? We're not sure. I will show you where, but it's frontal parietal areas. I will show you more specifically. And system 1, the automatic, is very domain specific. This is kind of, I think, the intuition you had. But the question is, what comes from, what is created first? Is it a bottom-up driven that system 2 emerges from? I will try to make the point that system 2 is the system, the part that will initiate the task, and having lots of experience, we funnel representation, the root, the outcome of our computation to what we call system 1, which will be the perceptual system. And the more we can do that, the more we can free our thinking to novel situations, etc. But in order for it to be useful, it cannot be just stimulus-response association. It has to figure out why stimulus and response are associated. This is kind of a top-down thing. Was that clear? I will give lots of examples. Okay? The other thing which is interesting, so we have system 2, system 1. It's not necessarily a different task. It's how we change with respect to the task. Dissociate system 2 and system 1. Right? That's the point. It's not just the other. If you want to know if it's a system 2 or system 1, ask what the performer's experience with this situation is. It's more relevant than what the task is. Okay, that's part of the point. And one of the things is what happens with aging. Okay? Aging, I mean real aging. Like let's say real aging now is after the age of 70. Okay? There is some deterioration in some of our, statistically speaking, some cognitive skills. Do they differ between system 1 and system 2? Any intuition?
Everything goes to system 1, to the first one.
So system 2 is kind of more sensitive to aging. And the question is, what have you been able to funnel to system 1 early enough, right? Which I think is very interesting, right? Because there is this very interesting book. It's called The Paradox of Aging, and by a person named Greenberg. And he's saying, on the one hand, I think lots of traditions. We have the wisdom of the elderly, right? There's this, okay, we have difficult problems. There's the group. Well, none of the candidates for presidency in the United States now, but anyhow, in politics, there's lots of very mature leaders, and they were elected. You can say people can retire, but they were elected. Okay, so there's the wisdom of the elders. On the other hand, we know that there's lots of sort of system 2 kind of, and we can measure it. What is the magnitude of working memory? We'll talk about it next week, but sort of in a way, it kind of decays with age. So, what kind of things would you like to consult with? Forget the politeness part, but in terms of getting best advice with the elderly, and what wouldn't you? Things they have,
that they have done in the past.
Exactly. So map and trick in lots of things to things that they haven't encountered before. So with age, you have more and more situations that are similar to things you haven't encountered before. You know how it goes. You have seen lots of things that how it looks like 3 steps ahead. You don't need to apply a specific model online because you've been there, so you can retrieve the outcome. None of us is amazing in following a model-based several sequence planning. So they've been there. That's good because their experience is there. But if it's a completely novel skill, novel situation, you want to train people that, and of course this is very generalizing, but basically you want to train people that have lots of time to learn and also probably with some aspects they can, at least they're not interfered with previous knowledge. It doesn't mean that they can, but it's probably good to go to novice, train them, but new tricks that are not very similar to old tricks, this is not the best age to do. Okay, and it has to do with system, okay? The idea is that it can be understood in terms of the balance between system 1 and system 2. So let's go for the chess masters example, right? And what I'll try to convince you is, of course, when we start chess, this is very cognitively demanding task. I'm not saying that chess masters, talking about the transfer to an expert, it's not cognitively demanding. But what is it that the chess master has in terms of chess or other skills, and we don't, and makes them an expert? And I'll also give an example of reading, and I will try to give an example of reading also when you don't become an expert, right? When some people, even though they have lots of experience, similar to their peers' experience, they do not become experts in reading. They can read, but they're not experts. Dyslexia will be the case I'm working on in my lab, and I'll try to integrate our results within the same perceptual framework. So, what I'd like to show you is the similarity. It's a little pushing it, but not much, I think, between we're all experts in face identification and acquiring chess expertise. On the face of it, this is very different because we think about identifying faces as like, wow, definitely this is perception. We kind of we see faces all over, whether they're there and whether they're not there. I mean, it's kind of pretty good in identifying people's faces. It is very perceptual. I'll try to show that the same characteristics that we as cognitive researcher can say about our skills with face perception apply to people who are chess masters. Namely, this does not characterize all the population. In fact, it characterizes a very small part of the population, but they have, and even chess masters have less experience with chess than probably than with face perception, at least in terms of years, in terms of when they started it. But the idea is to show the similarity, right? It's an expertise. What is the marker of expertise? What is the marker of sort of making decisions based on system 1? And I'll show you how it applies also to chess masters. It is kind of as cognitive as one gets, okay, at least as a novice, right? So what makes us experts? What are the characteristics of us as experts? Also, there's people who are perhaps not experts in face perception. They're called non-experts in face perception, but there's also a word for it. I don't know what you said, but I'm sure that once you said it, this is the word, right? Is a question or an answer? Prosopagnosia? So the term is familiar? Now it's familiar? It's written somewhere, right? But then it's kind of it's math, but all sorts of other words. So yeah. So most of us are experts in faces, but as with almost any expertise, there are people who are less experts. By definition, if you say, okay, there's a distribution of skills in the population, let's say people who are sort of 2 standard deviation poorer than the distribution, well, we can say, of course, there are people that do worse. There's a distribution. So the edge of the population, in case of face identification, is called prosopagnosia. Initially, it was known for people who had acquired prosopagnosia, meaning they had some kind of health injury or some kind of thing that interfered with the adequate processing, but in some developmentally they had no problem. But now we know now know. I can tell you it will apply to any skill, any expertise you're looking for. So it depends whether there are researchers that are looking for this expertise. So there were researchers, lots of people work on face identification. So they found people whose developmental skills as face identifiers, not identify that it is face versus non-face, but whose specific face it is, and they are called developmental prosopagnosia. Okay? I'm sure there will be developmental. I identify myself as having developmental dysphasia. Do you guess what that is? I'm the only person in the world identified that way because I just made up this term, space, orientation in space, this, not too good, okay? Which means for me that even when I go in an area that I'm very relatively familiar with, it will take me much longer to become an expert and find my way by system one, because I managed to follow all this relevant information to system one and think about other things and still find my way. Okay, so this is dysphasia. So that's I don't know why they don't call it dysphasia, but prosopagnosia. But anyhow, this is the name for prosopagnosia. So the idea is the following: there's lots of things that are specific to faces. There are specific areas in the brain. They are in the posterior part of the brain. They are in the high-level visual areas. The specific area is named the combination of where it is located and what its function is. It's fusiform, F4, fusiform face area, which is selectively activated by viewing faces. Is it really just activated by viewing faces? We'll see in a minute that it isn't, but there's a big debate. Yes, other things that we learn to do well also activate, to identify very, very skillfully, also activate this area, but there are other markers. If we have a deficit in this area, if we have a lesion in this area, our ability to identify faces is impaired. But there are also, and this is kind of the brainish part, but there are also characteristic behavioral markers of expertise. What are characteristic behavioral markers of expertise? I'll address two. One is what is called holistic processing. You know what is holistic processing?
The opposite of serial processing.
It's kind of that, in a way, we have to, we cannot not to, process the whole, even when we are asked to process the parts. So like the whole, that's why it's called holistic. Let me give you an example, and the other thing is the position specific. Let me just skip that, because we want. This is, it's called here the part-whole effect, and the question is, the concept is that we have to do something holistic, and the question is how do we? Right, but don't do that. If you just look at it, and the question is, who is the person in the upper part, and who is the person in the lower part? Okay, and the idea is that it was taken. This picture was taken by this one half from one person and the other half from another person, and we look at it, and we can't not integrate it into a holistic identification. Whereas if we think about what we do in a bottom-up manner, we have the parts, and then we have the whole, and we kind of combine our identification. And here there's something that at least consciously or immediate person is of the whole, and it's very, very confusing for us to be asked to dissociate and to process just either the upper part or the lower part. Who's the upper part? Who's the lower part? And how did you do that? Did you look together? Did you? So anyhow, but of course, this distinction becomes much easier if you sort of physically segregate them, because, and the idea is that this is a marker of expertise that we have very difficult time. I mean, in principle, you could have focused here and identified that, and focused here and identified that. I think part of it that we have these habits of where we focus, we have when we have a picture, and how we process it. And we process it with sort of the eyes of specific functions, and we process it with the mouth, and together we make some kind of distinction. And it's very difficult for us to avoid these processes, and we have some holistic processing for the whole item, and have lots of difficulties in what could have been easier, and it is just to address part of it. So faces, and this is a marker of holistic processing. Okay, I will show it to you in an experiment that people have done in chess players, that they have a holistic processing of the chessboard. Of course, we don't. I mean, maybe the chess master hears, but not very likely. This is one marker. The other is what is called the inverted faces. So expertise, again, our expertise is given, and it's very intuitive in a way, because we're so used to see faces, but how often do you see inverted faces? Probably not very often. So our expertise with the kind of image that we have been previously exposed to a large degree, and this means that even if all we have to do is just compare whether two serially presented items are of the same person or not. When it's inverted, when we're upright, we're very good in faces, but when it's inverted, even though for a novice, suppose it's something that we're not familiar with at all, it has no benefit in being upright versus the other, because we just compare the elements. However, for things we're very, very familiar with, we do all these intuitions, they work for the kind of presentations we've been exposed to. Obviously, upright is the kind of presentation we've been exposed to. So we're very, very poor in all sorts of things, in like just comparing same different when faces, not extremely poor, but compared to the upright position, we're quite poor. This is just another example of the in a way, the specificity to the upright orientation. I wanted to ask you who this person is, but the answer is, so it's been done since then to many, many individuals, but Thatcher was the original model for the face inversion thing. And in a way, it's interesting because we roughly can identify that this is Thatcher, but what's wrong with her? This is you see what you see the point is that this is another, I have a demo here that works even nicer. Just a second. No. Yes. So there's this boy, and I think it's just because it's the same thing. It's not Thatcher, and it's inverted. If you look at it this way, it looks okay, but when you see, we're very insensitive to the fact that actually the faces, the lips are not really inverted. It would have been exactly the same. If you make it upright, you would see that it looks just a bit, right? If you just look at that, right? It's not inverted. It's not inverted, right? But the rest of the face is inverted. So it would be exactly the same thing, that you would get this very crappy kind of face-looking image. But this is annoying to us only when they're upright. It does not annoy us at all when they are inverted, because this general relation that the eyes here and the mouth here is okay, and we don't have this general inversion. We're really, really good just with the upright position, so completely unsensitive to the parts in the upright position. And what I'd like to convince you with is that this is what happens to chess masters. So the way they look at the chessboard is not that different from how we look at faces in a way. So what does that mean? We can look at where in the brain the chessboard activates, sets activations. By the way, for chess masters, it also activates fusiform face area. To what extent it's specific? Well, it's not that specific, obviously. Not to the same extent as it activates when they see faces. An interesting conceptual question: do you expect that chess masters who have used not just experiments with the chessboard and whose fusiform face area is activated when they look at the chessboard, how would their face identification skills be affected by this experience? What do you think? Why do I ask this question? I will elaborate. My question comes from an idea.
The idea would be if the question is a model which is used in the system, like a helping model in the specific chess playing master, or does it actually occupy space
one of the ideas of a famous cognitive scientist, Stanley Harvey, that the hypothesis called recycling, which is kind of, there's lots of, we have brain capacity with neurons, many networks, and the question is, what do you do with them? And we have neurons that do face identification, but suppose they're stolen for, they're recruited for chess playing. Will that interfere because you have less resources with your face perception? I'm not going to give you a clear answer. You can to some extent see it from the results, but just trying to integrate stuff. I mean, experts, is it limited by how much space you have? And if so, then yeah, this is the kind of predictions they would have. Personally, I don't think this is the case, but I don't think it is sufficiently studied systematically. So, but that's the idea. So what's the case with chess masters? One thing which characterizes experts, as we said, is that they use, and I'm trying to convince you, that they can, at least to basic things that are familiar with them, similar to things they identify the similarity to things they have been exposed to a large degree. They do not need system 2, they can retrieve based on long-term experience. How can we measure that? This is a very interesting study from the 70s, Jason Simon, who characterized the memory for arrangements in chessboards. And what they have shown is that their memory, let me just show you an example. There, you take the chess master, you present them with the chessboard. This is what I'm doing now, and I'm asking you to try to memorize the arrangement of the pieces that you see. I'll give you 10 seconds. Do your best. And in 5 seconds, I will ask you to reconstruct this arrangement. Can you do that?
Yeah.
You can? Do you want to do it?
Not all of it, but yeah, you have to all say the green and the
Right. How much experience? Wonderful.
Yeah,
How much
yeah,
experience
yeah.
do you have with chess?
Yeah, I saw a lot of YouTube videos of chess.
So in a way, that's exactly the point. Chess masters can reproduce very, very well this set of pieces, this arrangement, after seeing it for very few, 3-4 seconds. Is it because they have an amazing working memory? What do I mean working memory? They haven't seen this arrangement before, so they have to actively remember all this information. And do they have an amazing memory? So you can say no, but do they have memory specific for the potential arrangements in a chessboard, given the pieces in chess? You can check that by using the same pieces, but just arranging them in a random order. What do I mean a random order? That is not a valid arrangement one could attain with the chessing. Okay? How do chess masters do that?
No better than us.
Horribly. Like us. No better than us is a nicer way of putting it. Yes, they do. So their advantage is not that they manage to set an archive for all these things that they're using. They actually set something which is quite specific. They can reproduce things that make sense. They don't just reproduce them. In a way, also, we'll see it in a minute, they perceive it. This is kind of, how come they manage in 3 seconds? Because they perceive it, retrieve something, assuming it's sufficiently similar, it makes sense, and it also narrows down the specific, in a way, model-based, the specific plans that they would go, because they would know that, this is very similar to whatever, this game, and these are not good moves to do. So it also kind of specifies which next steps make sense and which do not. So when they are asked to actually verbalize their reasoning, it doesn't include a larger number of steps, a larger number of nodes. Each node is more sophisticated and knowledgeable, but it is specific to their game information. Just a second. This is an interesting thing because it suggests, well, let me ask you. Well, I can show you that you're a bit of chess masters. How can I show you that? I will ask you to reproduce this arrangement. Look for 5 seconds. can reproduce it. It's okay if you can, don't worry. The point of, again, no, I mean, whoever feels they can reproduce it, raise your hand. No? Good. Have you ever played chess? Exactly. Thank you. So, what do I mean? That everybody who's played some chess can reproduce it. Nobody who has never played any chess can reproduce it. This is working memory. This is long-term memory. In a way, it's as if an interesting thing. I can, suppose you collaborate with me, I can tell how proficient you are in chess by measuring which arrangement you can reproduce with 3 seconds of experience, of exposure. Because what I'm looking at is what is the, sort of in a way, what is the expertise that you have acquired? What arrangement do you have long-term representations like? Well, we didn't test it, but let's go along with it. You could reproduce a larger part. And the thing is that probably you're the one with the largest chess experience in this room. So it's kind of, it goes both ways. You can use this as kind of, I can characterize your level of proficiency just by doing, in a way, a memory assessment for valid information, because the way you learn chess is kind of, okay, the first arrangement. Then there's, the very famous moves like famous checkmates, and probably those of you who pass through the 3-4 lessons will be able to do that, etc., etc. And then we can do that, which goes the same way. And then the question is, where are these arrangements stored in your brain? Which would be the next question. Yes.
Okay, we're talking about like regular people, not people with photographic memory. They could maybe probably get any chessboard and after 3 seconds draw it like a picture.
No, people with photographs, with photographic memory.
Don't exist?
No. You can try to prove me wrong, but I mean, it's a very strong statement. Yes. They don't exist. I mean, there was a story about one person. One person because it's a matter of whether you can test it. That a friend of a person who worked in a lab in MIT, whose boyfriend said she has an amazing photographic memory. How can you test a photographic memory? The ultimate test is if we can do what's called stereograms. One eye sees something, the other eye sees something, and the information is only in the binding of the 2 images of the 2 eyes. And you can do all sorts of small patches out of information. And the idea was, how can you test it? Show this to this person one day, show it the other day, and then see whether they can fuse it. They never managed to do it. She disappeared before they did. But anyhow, no, I don't know of any counter evidence that people who can practice and go a long way in memorizing specific things, memorizing digits, memorizing specific visual items, because this is system 1, but it's very specific. It's very specific.
It's context dependent. Of course, chessboard.
It's experience and context and practice dependent. I don't know of any. What you're suggesting is in line with some myths about savants, right? So individuals who are not necessarily very experts, but sort of can reproduce lots of sensory information. I have never seen any convincing evidence. Maybe, I'm saying I'm making a strong point. Maybe there is counter evidence. Definitely not within the normal range population.
Maybe I just watch too many Hollywood movies. Might be.
If you saw it, but no, seriously, I'm not familiar with any case like this.
The experiment that we needed to do for this class, it was kind of training about just using the visual system without identifying objects or something like that, right?
It's a very interesting question. To what extent, what images you can reliably recall and how they have to do with your previous experience. You really it's amazing. Well, let's not. It's a good question. Sort of like how much information do we store in our long-term memory based on a single exposure, right?
Yeah, no,
A lot.
there were a lot of images with similar objects, so you can't, I can't remember it by there's a store there and things like that. I can't use words in order to remember the pictures. I just kind of needed to look at it without thinking and then just feel it was there before or not, something like that.
I
So it
agree.
happens
I
after
agree.
that.
We have much more. We store much more implicit information that can be retrieved by being presented with it again than I would have suspected. But it has to do with our previous experience. The difference for stimuli that are very, very non-semantically related to any experience that we've had. But yes, this is exactly, I agree. It's a very strong, I think, demonstration of our huge.
And then you will have a photographic memory. You will just like practice it a lot.
If we say that it's a context related and experience related and semantic related camera, I agree. What kind of photos is your camera taking, right? But I mean, what's the resolution? Is it the same? I mean, so we have a lot of capacity to remember things that are related to things we have experience with and are semantically informative to us. And that increases our ability to learn new stuff, right? I just say, I should talk about it not next week, but in 2 weeks, but just say like, suppose, and it's also analogous to like learning auditory stuff. If you're presented with, I don't know, a word in, just say Chinese, let's say, that uses sequences that are not familiar to you at all, you will have a very hard time replicating. But if you're presented with a new word that follows Hebrew morphology, that follows whatever, the syllables you're familiar with, it doesn't require a huge vocabulary because it's very structured. So the thing is that it's structured. And that's why I said, like, if you have an arbitrary choice of this is dark, like what I said about this stereogram, what I meant is that if you have this is dark, nothing, dark, nothing, dark, nothing, okay, so it's kind of, you have lots of, do you see what I mean here? That you have a randomly chosen array, either it's black or white. So you really have to store this information, and there's no experience, and there's no structure, it has no semantics, and the question is, to what extent you can reproduce this when it's beyond, I don't know, 3 by 3. And I'm saying, nobody can. Now the question is, what constitutes the difference between these elaborate and quite similar pictures that you're presented with and this thing, where these pictures seemingly very similar, we can simply say the difference often between what we have actually been exposed to and what not. Whereas if you try to do that, this is the kind of test they wanted to take. This is presented to one eye, this is presented to the other eye. If you can bind them together, it makes sense. And I don't think there's a person in the world that can withstand this test. Photographic in the sense of context. Just nothing. They have to actually remember from scratch. Okay? So, chess masters. So the thing I'm trying to say with chess masters, one question, it's a bit too late in the lesson to ask it, but it will apply for next time. So now remember, do you want to have a break in the lesson, or you want to have, how many people want to have, it's a bit too late for today, but as of next time, how many people want to have a break after 45 minutes, roughly? So basically, we'll have a break. See, maybe after half, everybody would like to have a break after half the lesson next time. But next time, we'll have a break, okay? Just thought about it too late, and it doesn't make sense to have a break now, right? So it's kind of, 2/3 into this. Okay, so next time. So, what happens with chess masters? So chess masters, behaviorally, remember the congruent versus the holistic processing? So here, what they did is same different tasks. So you say, you have these things, and you're asked to whether this is same as the one before, as the one picture before, but we have, and you ask about whether the lower part is the same as the lower part here, and it could either be congruent, namely that it's taken from the same person, the lower and upper part are taken from the same person, or incongruent, where the lower and upper part are taken from different persons. This is the experiment we talked about before. But the other thing is you have a chessboard, and you are asked whether its lower part is the same or different, or lower part is, again, same concept, okay? It is congruent, taken from the same game, or not taken from the same game, but you're not directly asked about anything that you have to do. It's just about is it same or different, and the idea is that you can guess, right? What would be the evidence for expertise? Congruent versus incongruent, right? Which is kind of same different. You ask about is the lower part exactly the same as the lower part of the earlier chessboard that you saw, whether the lower part is taken and the upper part are taken from the same game, from the same arrangement, or you just cut it out. So you have, so faces are kind of there as a control, because the idea is that we are all experts in faces, whether you are expert chess players, you will fall under, no offense, right? Players, and there are novices, which probably applies to the rest of the class that have sort of played a few times but have not had some sort of experience with it. And this is the deep rhyme, so how well you did, and how well you did with congruent versus incongruent. So the experts, well, everybody is an expert in faces, so all groups did better in this is the holistic face. This is the effect that I was trying to describe the holistic face tendency of expert face perceivers. So they perform, this score is how well you do. I will not get into how exactly it's calculated. So you do better the congruent compared with the incongruent, and this applies in a similar way to all three groups. You could ask whether novices do better. Remember I asked you, who sees faces better? There's no evidence that experts in chess do any worse in faces compared to the other two groups. But anyhow, they all show the congruency effect. But the congruency in chess is shown, but is only shown. I mean, the non-experts do just everything worse, because it's a very difficult comparison, because it's lots of items to compare between, right? One back. So it's not surprising that they just do worse in all conditions, but basically they don't have a congruency effect. They don't suffer, or they don't benefit, if upper and lower part of the chessboard are taken from the same or from different games. Okay? The other thing is inversion. So here it's the face, an inverted face, and the chessboard. Actually, this is when you look at the basic arrangement, when you are sort of presented with the game, this is how it's typically presented. This is the arrangement that you have experience with seeing, but just like inverted face, you can be exposed to inverted chessboard, and the question is, and here it's the same question. You have, it's called one deck, so you're supposed to say whether this is the same as that, and this is the, where's the chessboard? Anyhow, this is the same for chess arrangement, and the question is, you ask same or different, but sometimes it's same for both are upright, and sometimes it's same for both are inverted, okay? So the question is how easy it is for you to tell that the two faces are the same when they're inverted. And if you have no experience with anything, it doesn't make a difference for you whether it's inverted or not. And the thing is that both expert in faces, which is everybody, and expert in chess has a benefit in upright comparison compared with inverted. Interesting, by the way, and this is kind of the activation So this is behavior. Let's not get into it, but this is the activation, fMRI study, the activation in the fusiform face area. So this is the activation of the upright and inverted in expert for faces, and this is for novices. Well, interesting, right? It's an interesting question. Inverted faces do not activate fusiform face area less. Sometimes they tend to activate more. Now, why is this the case? This is the observation. Now, people can talk about it. So it's not that the degree of activation per se matched to how skilled you are with something. One account for it is that, well, maybe you're making a greater effort if you want to do something with a less familiar form of presentation. But anyhow, inverted items do not, often they yield larger activation rather than smaller. And this is what happens, with the chessboard to novice and to experts. So the overall thing is that experts viewing chessboard, it activates the fusiform face area. So this is all about activating the fusiform face area, more than novices, though also less than their activation of faces. Okay, they're still, this is observation, but in terms of their previous experience, they're still exposed to faces from the day they are born, and they're not exposed to, it's very difficult to compare the degree of previous exposure when you assess an adult. Obviously, we are all first exposed to faces. The other thing is that you see, interestingly, and this often is the case, but not here, the inverted yields larger activation, and then in that case, of course, it's explained as more effort. But what else? I mean, in the expert, but not in the novice. Okay? So the idea is that here the expert, and it raises a question that I will not want to discuss now, and this is fusiform face area as an area of expertise versus an expert area for faces. Obviously, it's not just activated by faces, it's activated by other things that we are familiar with. So just to summarize, okay, I've presented chess masters as an example of people who are really experts as a function of many years of experience. This is quite rule of thumb. Some general numbers. I think they're just partially based about how many years, how many hours of experience does one need to gain expertise? So this common number of about 10,000 hours, what does it mean? Is it specific to the expertise? We're talking about complex expertise. The idea is about playing an instrument as an expert, maybe chess. Also, this is about, probably, we can just do it in a way back of the envelope, but not back of the envelope here. Fast calculation about how long it should take a person to become an expert reader in terms of years. So let's say we're talking about 10,000 hours. But how long in years it takes us to attain 10,000 hours? Let's go through it slowly together. Let's suppose we read 3 hours a day. We don't read less than that, including school and everything, from the age of 6. 3 hours a day. So a year would take us to 1,000. So this means we need about 10 years to become expert readers. This is interesting because we should make a distinction in the few minutes that we'll have remaining to talk about reading between understanding reading and becoming expert readers. Right? Expert readers are those, what I like to say, who show no difference in terms of eye movement, in terms of how we talked about between long words and short words, who perceive words rather than read words. Reading the alphabet is serial. Perceiving, like system 1, that's what I'd like to say. And this is an interesting thing because we think about kids that are, I don't know, at the end of first year at school, and they say, they can read. They're not expert readers. What does it mean? They can read. But if reading is the goal, they can do that. But if reading is the means, namely, they're not sufficiently good decoders, so if they're interested in sophisticated books, this is an efficient way of getting information. When they really want to listen to something interesting, they would ask somebody else to do it because they're not sufficient experts. And if you look at how people do in terms of multiplying, single digit multiplication. So here is the thing of how I try to, I want to, and I think it happens also in chess. Let's say, I'll give you an easy one. If you want to, I ask you to add, but don't write anything. This is kind of well, it's challenging for working memory. 96 plus 75. What? 71. 96. I mean, the answer is not my main drive. It's the way we attain the answer. And the point is that none of us is an expert in two-digit addition because we haven't done that. So, I mean, had we been spending our last 10 years, probably we would have by now. But this is luckily not how we spend them. I think people spend too less time in some kind of arithmetic because we don't have intuition for magnitudes and numbers. But we're not experts also because the experts gain intuition. If it makes sense or not. We're not experts. We lack the intuition. Sometimes it's a problem. But we do combine system 2 and system 1. How do we combine system 2 and system 1? Because the reason we can do two-digit numbers is because the first digit is something that does not require memory. We can retrieve it, right? So we retrieve, I don't remember what I said, 6 plus 9. The 6 plus 9 part, you can retrieve. If this were, you were completely just not expert in anything, it would have all been working memory, and this would be set. Not very set, but you couldn't have added. So if you were experts in 2 digits, you could also do 3 digits. And the analogy in chess experts is that they have these similar arrangements, they can map them, and now they can do the next calculation, because to a large portion they can retrieve from system 1 and do system 2. Okay, so the question is, to what extent you can manipulate and allocate in larger and larger chunks of the processing to pre-process stuff. Okay. Yeah, that's so just about how do we store them. So the idea is that I didn't bring one of the slides I didn't bring. The idea is that if you're presented with a completely novel situation, I don't know if something is completely novel, I think we're completely lost, but something which is roughly novel. I thought this is a lateral view. This is a lateral view of the cortex. So what you'll have is like the system 2 trying to implement the basic aspects of the task. Let's say this is all the frontal part. Let's say partly the frontal with the parietal. I will give you an example. We have 5 minutes for an example of a study that we did in the lab. But the idea is that if you have an opportunity to learn the characteristics and regularities of this task, regularities and arrangement, you can gradually store the information in the posterior areas, the schemes in the posterior areas, and form gradually domain-specific, task-specific representations. And here, so this is the hypothesis, and here are kind of an example of such representation. So we're looking from below at the cortex, and we are looking at a series of areas of expertise that people reported, given all sorts of, lots of, let's say mainly fMRI studies, but not only. So we know about the areas that we discussed. This is a look from the bottom at the physical face area. Of course, it's a schematic representation, meaning that overall it responds more to faces compared with other items. Doesn't mean that it doesn't respond to. There are, if you look more medially, there's an area which I don't care about the names, but sort of responds more to scenes, to houses, to external environment, and in a way, this is kind of its domain of expertise. This responds to objects, but there's also this area, which one can find only in expert readers, and this is the area called, again, kind of the some leap of faith to some extent, but visual word form area. Why is it called visual word form area? Because responses of expert readers, let's say, it's raining. people here would have this area activated when you read words, when you can read the words, right? When you see letters that form words in languages that you can read. I mean, if you see letters and they don't map to any sounds because they're not letters, because you haven't acquired this alphabet, you're not familiar with this alphabet, it will not activate this area. And if you are not literate, nothing will activate it, well, no words will activate it, etc., etc. So the idea is that this is an area of expertise that was formed, and people have tracked it because you don't see it in people who are 6 years old. They have not acquired reading yet, so you can track its gradual build-up in a way, formation. This is an area of expertise. What I would like to claim is to generalize this concept is that all this posterior part of the cortex is kind of a bag of schemes composing areas of expertise, whereby in the early years they're mainly dictated by the stimulus-driven type of connectivity that activates this part. But as we become experts, meaning that we learn to attribute information, importance, to some aspects of the stimuli that are related to the task we're interested in. For instance, in letters, there are small changes that make a difference, like a task or right? Visually similar letters that if they're very similar, you don't know whether they should be grouped together or not unless you know the actual alphabet and say, this is a different category or not. This is task-dependent representation. So training with specific tasks gradually makes it more specific, more domain-specific. Area of expertise, I like to say, it's a marker. Domain-specific area is a marker of being an expert because you have trained a lot with these representations. You store lots of skills, and mostly these are the areas where these skills are stored. Will you always, if you practice something, will you always form such kind of expertise, behavioral expertise, and areas of expertise? So, this is my claim. Well, it's not just actually, no, I think, I trying to say whether it's a generally agreed, I think it would be a largely agreed or claim, is that in order to form these expertise behaviorally and in terms of brain representation, you have to understand the task, but it's not just an explicit understanding. You have to retrieve the regularities that characterize the task. I have 5 minutes, so I'll give 3 examples, somewhat mean examples in a way. I didn't get to ask them. Taken from Kahneman. Kahneman says, Kahneman also says, yes. How do you form expertise if you have enough practice? But practice is essential but not sufficient. And you have an opportunity to learn the regularities that characterize the task. So for example, this is one of the claims they raise about clinicians. We're clinicians that are exposed to many, either, they could be radiologists that are exposed to specific visual information, they could be clinicians in terms of they apply some routine and the question is whether it's efficient. And he says, the crucial thing when you train an expert is to give them the opportunity first to be exposed to the outcome of what they make, because they make, and then to be exposed to what is it that's bounded between the decisions and the outcomes. So what are the clear regularities that he knows whether such a protocol is effective or not? And if you don't get it, you don't become an expert. And I think the concept applies, whether it's a complex computational like chess, or whether it's a seemingly easy task. I will give you just one example for the task. I will take 3 minutes longer, but not more than that, just to illustrate, because so far I've given you examples for complex tasks that become partially perceptual, and the degree to which they become perceptual kind of marks the degree of your expertise. And whether you manage to make them perceptual has to do with the regularities that you manage to retrieve. And in a way, just last 5 minutes about some things that we do in my lab is we look at expertise in something very simple. But we think we can nail the process, the actual mechanism that underlie gaining an expertise. And I think we have one homework about that, right? Eva? Do we have this task as a homework? So we have, but this will just be a promo for subsequent breaks. So like this task, okay? Which tone? There are two tones, presumably better quality than now. What? I will give you just few examples, presumably better quality than now. And what you're asked to do is say which of them has a higher pitch. This is seemingly a very simple perceptual task because if it's good quality, there's just pure tones, some maps anatopically already in the cochlea. This is something you have learned and are familiar with. So is it a low-level task, a high-level task? And what I'm saying, well, depends on your amount of experience. If you're a novice, it's a high-level task. You have to keep this tone in mind, to perceive this tone, to keep it in your mind's ear till the second tone. Then you have the second tone and you actually have to compare. A comparison is a very demanding task. So even though it's presumably low level, actually the novice, and we see that it activates the same frontal-parietal areas, working memory, high level, particularly in the beginning, and particularly if it has no regularity. Just one example, what are regularities? So I'll give you an example of when it's a cognitively demanding task, and when it's really, I can make you experts, well, 5 trials is a bit pushing it, but very few trials. So just one task that first task that you will have after adding 2 digits for today is just comparing 2 tones. Don't look at the board, because the answer is here, so it's not fun, right? So just listen to the 2 tones and tell yourself which one is higher. If you care, if it works, why doesn't it? Nothing, it got stuck. Maybe I should learn something from this. Why doesn't? If it doesn't work, then we have to. What do you say? I will not restart. Don't worry. Why doesn't it? Forget it. I will start. Don't forget it. I will start the next. It's really a very nice demo. So we will start with how can one become an expert in something which is initially demanding very quickly, and what does it mean in terms of mechanism? But I can ask you something very quickly. What would be the crux of what? How can we make somebody an expert very quickly?
We'll give him the interdependence. We give him the rules how the things are interdependent.
So it's a similar idea, but in perception, we have very little access to these implicit processes. So if I give you the rule, it doesn't mean that you can functionally use it. But I do something similar. I introduce regularities that we are, I think, innate to perceive them very, very quickly. So I make one of them without regularities and the same task with a series of zones with regularities that we all perceive, retrieve, and effectively take advantage of within 5 trials. And then even though it's the same task, every trial is the same. In one condition, you're very good very, very quickly, and in the other, it kind of remains demanding. So that was the demo, but I'll show you next week. So see you next week. That's it. Yeah.
If any one of you is still not enrolled to the Moodle, then enroll yourself. You can do it. If you don't know how to do it, then write me an email. And it's very important because we are writing all the things there about good and play.
Right, because then if you want to send messages,
Yeah, you want to
and you will not receive them.
way
Right.